Welcome to This Week in Human Relations and Criminal Justice. This week, we're going to talk about work habits. And while, again, this is a chapter more geared toward the business world, we'll try and equate it to your everyday work existence, whether it's working on road patrol, or working within a correctional facility or within the correction system, or working within the juvenile justice system or anywhere within criminal justice. So during this chapter, we're going to talk about the importance of good work habits and time management, talk about decreasing any tendencies that any of us might have toward the idea of procrastination, developing attitudes and values that we can use to help become more productive, and also develop skills and techniques that also can help us become more productive. And then talk about time wasting practices and how to overcome those. When we talk about work habits and productivity, we're talking about how we take our approach to work, including things like being organized, setting priorities, handling our workload, and then with productivity, it's the amount of quality work, not just work, but the quality of work that we accomplish during our day. But there are plenty of things that happen throughout our workday that cause us to reduce the amount of work we do or put off the amount of work we do for a variety of reasons. And so the first thing we're going to talk about when it comes to developing work habits is one of the reasons why we choose not to do the work, and that's procrastination. And procrastination is just a fancy word for delaying a task for either an invalid or a really weak reason. And so we have procrastination is a gap between the intention of doing something and the actual action of taking care of that task. So why do people procrastinate doing something? Well, first off, it's having to do something that we either don't like or we look at it and find it to be overwhelming, something that seems to be too big to accomplish, that we feel we wouldn't be able to accomplish anyway. And while in the business world that can be more common, if you think about the things that would come within our positions in criminal justice, then we're talking about things that we might have to accomplish, such as a rather big report that is going to be long, lengthy, very detailed, and so the longer we put it off, the more we don't have to think about it. And so that is a reason to procrastinate. Another reason is fear of consequences. And so we put off doing things that we know we need to get done because we might fear getting bad news or being reprimanded or getting a bad report or evaluation. And this is across the board in any career that we have. And so if we are given a task to do or we have to do something that is part of our daily job, we might put it off because we don't want or we fear the outcome if we don't do it right, or it's not done to the satisfaction of whoever is evaluating us, and so we put it off. The fear of success is another reason to procrastinate. And that might seem like a oxymoron, but really there are instances where if you become too good at what you do, then you become somebody's go-to, and you become the person who is given more responsibility, and that might seem like a bigger burden in your job. And so fear of success, whether it is something that people do cognizantly or not, might also be a reason for procrastination. To put off doing work might be because you feel you're not getting a good enough feedback, you're not getting any sort of reward or recognition for a job well done or for something that you do, and so you just continue putting it off because what's the sense in putting in the effort when nobody's going to recognize what you do? Another one is rebelling against control. And for those who use this as a reason for not doing their work, this might be one where they say, I'm not going to do what my boss tells me to do right now, I'll get it done when I get it done. Because they don't like being told when they have to do something or when they have to get something accomplished. Enjoying the rush. Now, there are some people out there who like the idea of getting things done under pressure. And the more pressure, the more they enjoy that getting things done under the gun. And so they put it off until the very last minute because they enjoy that feeling. And then the last one, or at least on this slide, the last one is perfectionism. Wanting to make sure that they get it done just the way they want it all the time, every time. And so they're always waiting until the very last second so that it is exactly the way they want it all the time. The problem with perfectionism is if you always are this way, then the project is never going to get done to your satisfaction because there's always going to be something that you feel could be done better. And I remember hearing a story about the early inventor of Mercedes-Benz and how the car would never have been put on the road because he was always tinkering and always trying to make it better. And it wasn't until his wife just decided to hop in the car and drive it down the road one day that people started to recognize the car. And this was back in the 1890s, so it was, you know, a long, long time ago. But he was never satisfied with the product that he had built. And he was always tinkering, and he was always procrastinating putting the product on the road to show what he had built, because he always felt he could do something better or tinker with this. And it was his wife who took the initiative to drive the car to show him that his product was good enough. But that's a procrastinator. That's a part of procrastinating, is that you're not willing to let go of the project because you always think there's something more that can be done to make it better. So now that we know what or why people procrastinate, how do we try and reduce our propensity to procrastinate or put things off, especially in our work life? One of the things that we can do is realize that our end goal, the reason that we do the things we do, is to get it done and to finish what the task at hand is. And so if we know what the goal is, and we know that ultimately we have that finish line at the end, and the task being done is that finish line, then hopefully we will be able to realize that procrastinating is only delaying that goal, and the satisfaction of being able to cross that finish line is going to be enough to stave off any need to procrastinate. The other, another technique, which doesn't really apply too much in criminal justice because we don't have a cost-benefit analysis a lot in our job. The private industry does. But a lot of times what they'll do is they'll calculate the cost of procrastination, figuring out what it is that it's costing you by putting off finishing whatever it is that you're doing. And so if you have a project and you don't get it done by the time you are supposed to, what is the cost of that? Is the cost going to be in terms of your job, in the terms of family life? Because if you don't get that project done on time, is your boss going to tell you that you now have to stay late at night? You're going to miss your son's or daughter's Christmas concert, soccer game. So are those types of costs offset to the point where you're going to not want to procrastinate? And so those types of things. So calculate what the cost of you not procrastinating would be. Put in a counterattack. Forcing yourself to do something overwhelming, frightening, or uncomfortable might help to show that the task was not as bad as you thought it might be. And so getting that first ticket out of the way, instead of saying, well, maybe I'll get the next car, or maybe I'll get the next car, or getting that first report out of the way. If you're working in a facility and you're putting off writing an inmate up, get that out of the way, counterattack it, and face it head on. And then that will help alleviate some of that procrastination. You can jumpstart yourself, which is getting momentum going. Just a little bit. Assign yourself something really tiny. Again, a lot of these techniques you might think they don't apply in criminal justice, but remember, you're going to be getting a lot of projects or assignments assigned to you that do have merit as far as a lot of these principles that we're talking about right now. Just peck away at an overwhelming task, that big report, that big project, that big assignment that you get. Don't try and handle the entire project all at once. Peck away at it, little bits at a time, and do it in increments if you can. And then it won't seem like it's so overwhelming. You can also try to motivate yourself with rewards and punishments. And try giving yourself a little mini reward if you've worked on something for a set amount of time, by allowing yourself to do something fun, maybe play a game or something along those lines. But if you don't accomplish something that you thought you should or you had set out to, well, then take something away. And so you've got your own system of rewards and punishments. There is also a technique where you make yourself accountable to other people. And so you go to somebody else and say, listen, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have this part of this done by this time. And that way you have that extra incentive, because you now are making yourself accountable to somebody else. And therefore you might feel embarrassed, or you might feel that you've let somebody down if you don't have or make that commitment. And the last one is to just have a more positive attitude about your intentions. Sound serious about completing an activity. And that's more of an intrinsic thing, but in some people that can be very effective in getting things completed. So we've now talked about why people procrastinate and some techniques. Some work for some people, some work for others. And there are some people that just are hopeless at procrastination and none of these techniques will work. It just depends. But these are tools that you can use to try and assist you if you know that you have a tendency to procrastinate when it comes to getting things accomplished. In order to develop good work habits and also have some time management practices, you have to have proper attitudes, not only toward work, but toward the time that you make toward work. So to do this, there are a couple of things that need to be accomplished in order to be productive. One thing you have to do is develop some mission and some goals. And what this does is propel or make you more productive. The goals you have are a lot more specific than having just a mission statement. And so what this is not only for a singular person working on a project, but also tends to be a well-rounded way to run a business or an organization or an agency. And so developing a mission and goals is the major thing behind most organizations. Is you will find most organizations have a mission statement and then they will have goals beyond that, and that those goals are going to be more specific based on the mission statement. When it comes to doing a project to become more productive, what you want to do is begin what you're doing with the end in mind. So you want to know what you want to accomplish at the end of what you are doing. So if you want to have good productivity and time management, then make sure you know where you are, what you're doing, but where you want to end up. And so that will help you develop any sort of mission and goals that you have in your life and in your career. Next, you're going to have to develop some values in good attendance and productivity. And while that seems to be kind of like a no-brainer kind of statement, you will find that, especially in our line of work and what we do on a daily basis and the things that we see and the stress that we continue to be under, making sure that we have good attendance and productivity can be one of those things that can continue to be struggles with our daily lives. And so we have to value being part of that team. And especially in jobs like law enforcement and corrections, where we are part of a team, but we are isolated in our actual work, then we have to remember that we rely on each other. We may be out there in our own posts or in our own sectors, serving our communities, but we are a team together, and therefore we have to have that value of always being there for each other and having good attendance and being productive around each other, and that when that doesn't happen, then that doesn't end up being the best for the team. And I know that probably sounds really corny, but when you feel you can't rely on your teammates for whatever circumstance, then it ends up reducing the productivity of the entire organization. Value your time. If you need to get things done, whether it's finish reports, write tickets, do your block checks, get things done, whatever it is that is expected on your shift, you're less likely to waste time. Make sure you value neatness, orderliness, and speed. And while speed is not necessarily something that we will need in certain circumstances, orderliness and neatness will boost productivity. One of the reasons why we always want to look good and make sure that all of the products that our reports and our notes and everything like that is neat. Work smarter, not harder. I don't necessarily like this particular analogy, but if you look at it from a perspective, plan first before you jump in, and check to see if others in the organization are performing the same work. Again, more geared toward the private sector, but if you have coworkers who are thinking about putting together a project or an idea for your organization, that might help improve productivity among your other officers or might help with policy changes within your organization, work together. Don't bash heads and come up with the same ideas. So work smarter, not harder. Appreciate the importance of rest and relaxation, and this is going to be important especially in our line of work. Making sure that you get the right amount of rest, and we talked about this during the lecture on stress management. Our life expectancy in our line of work is late 50s. And so we need to make sure that when we are off duty, we get the rest and relaxation that we need because of the hypersensitivity that we have when we are on duty. And so make sure that we appreciate the importance of rest and relaxation, and these are some of the proper attitudes that we can develop to make sure that when we are on the job, we are at our most productive. To deal with effective time management, we try and come up with ways to make habits. To make habits, we get them to be motor memories. So we get them programmed into our brain. So time management skills are going to be no different than the skills we learn in any of the academies that we go through. So we learn to have motor muscle memories in things like shooting our weapons, learning how to defend ourselves, CPR management, first aid. All of those things we learn for muscle memory. Time management skills have to be the same way in order to get habits within our brain. And so it's repetition. Habits are learned through repetition. And so one of the things that we can do is to clean up and get organized. Organization is going to be one of the things that will help us become more effective time managers. So something called Mind Sweep. So you write down all tasks that you have to perform. Again, might not be as analogous to criminal justice, but if you are in a position where you have a job that you can write down everything that you have to do that day, that's one thing that you can do. You can also unclutter your life, and that can be either at the job or at home. If you have a desk job, try and keep the desk as uncluttered as possible, unless you are like me and you know where everything is on a cluttered desk. That happens to be me. Another thing you can do is plan your activities. And again, equating it with criminal justice is kind of hard because everybody knows in a job like corrections or police work, you can't plan your day. There are no ways that you can go out at the beginning of a shift and go, well, I'm going to make sure that this gets done and this gets done and this gets done, because the first thing you're going to do is hear the dispatcher on a radio sending you to a call that you didn't see coming, or in an institution you're going to have two inmates that are going to go at it. And so if you can, what needs doing, plan it out. And if you can put together to-do lists, fine. If you can set priorities, all the better. But a lot of times, put those things together, understanding that you will get those done in between the holy crap, I didn't see that coming part of your day. And you will still have some plan together of how you can accomplish your day. Find ways to boost your energy. And boosting your energy can be things like focusing on things and then taking rests. Having micro breaks doesn't boost energy. And again, a lot of this stuff is for the private sector. And so it's really hard for me to analogize this to the everyday work of police and corrections and things like that, because we don't get a chance to do this kind of thing. Because we don't have desk jobs and we don't have opportunities to sit and plan out our day. But if you do have days off where you need to get things accomplished, these are some effective time management techniques to make sure that you utilize your days off to the best of your ability. And so these are some options that you have that will allow you to utilize your time off to the best of your ability, because the time off we have is so precious. And especially in today's workforce in criminal justice, where we're working 12-hour shifts now, those days off need to be time managed a lot of times. And so we need to be able to utilize that time in these effective techniques that are mentioned on this slide. This is just a quick example of what a list or a effective time management kind of plan your activities could be for somebody who wants to make a list of things that not only do they need to get done at their job, but that they need to get done at home. And so this was just an actual example of planning activities. Other time management techniques that can be effective is to make good use of the technology that's out there. And so there are going to be ways, especially in the business world, that they can use calendars and reminders and things like that to boost their productivity. But there's also lots of technology that's out there that can keep you from being productive, like the bings that come when you have an email alert or things like that. And then they also want to make you aware that there's productivity tools that are out there that are good as long as you don't overuse them. So technology can be our friend, but they can also be our enemy. And so we have to remember that there's an even balance in using productivity tools. And anybody who looks at their smartphone and you go into the App Store, there's an actual category for productivity, and there's tons of apps in there for productivity. And so you have to decide what's best to help you be a better time manager and what could actually hurt you in being a time manager. And so concentrate on one key task at a time. There are ways to kind of fall down a rabbit hole. And so try not to bounce from one to one to one to one, because you're never going to get anything accomplished. So if you have a list of things that need to get done, concentrate on one task at a time. Then there's something known as the flow experience, where you concentrate totally and you try and block out anything that could disrupt you. And that way, once you are in the flow, you can get that task completed. And then making sure you have self-discipline, which for some people is pretty hard. And then you also have the problems with people that have concentration issues and those that have ADD issues. And so if you know that you are one of these people, then you also have the recognition that you might need some outside help to work with getting better concentration. Also make sure that you streamline your work. And when you streamline your work, that is allowing you to emphasize the more important tasks, and it allows you to get rid of the unproductive work and getting rid of work that does not add any value to either to what you're doing or to who you're assisting. So these are also time management techniques to keep in mind in whatever task or job you're trying to complete. Also work at a steady pace. Try not to work too fast, try not to work too slow. If you work at a steady pace, you improve your efficiency. But also understand that by working at that steady clip, you might need some sort of energy boost to avoid any sort of slowdown toward the end of your workday. And so what that helps is making sure that you accomplish more than someone who puts out a lot of extra effort only once in a while, because it's sort of like the tortoise and the hare. And so you are able to continue, just keep going and keep going and keep going, and then maybe toward the end of the day you might need just a real quick energy boost to make sure that you don't fall off. A lot of times with time management and productivity, you need some quiet, uninterrupted time. And this needs just for you to be able to think, plan, and come up with some creativeness that you've been lacking to get things completed. Make sure that you have the opportunity to use bits of time for multitasking for routine work. Bits of time usually adds up quite a bit. If you can do 2 or more routine chores simultaneously, that can enhance productivity. And if you decide that you can multitask, or when you find yourself multitasking, just make sure that you are not doing stuff that is rude or dangerous. So things like going through the checkout and making sure texting while you're trying to talk to the checkout gal, or texting and driving, stuff like that. When it comes to the private sector, they recommend that you stay in control of paperwork, which means that you respond to email and text messages within reason. And so you have to kind of keep in mind when you're working in the private sector, what is a reasonable amount of time to answer text messages, emails, paperwork that needs to be returned, stuff like that. And if you don't keep ahead of it or in control of it, then you're going to find yourself falling behind, which can lead to procrastination, which then throws your time management techniques all out of control. So that just is also something to keep in mind. Earlier we talked about needing energy boosters, especially to get to the end of the day when you work at a constant, steady pace. And so the recommendations for possible energy boosters are things like alternating between intense focus and rest pauses. So if you're sitting and doing a project, focus for maybe an hour, and then get up and walk around and shake it off and clear your mind. Making sure you turn off your email so that you have that opportunity to focus, because you're always hearing the bing, and so your first instinct is to automatically check that email because maybe it's important and you have to answer right away. That's going to break your concentration. Making sure that you maybe take a short break after that intense concentration to go and see how a coworker's doing and give them sort of a pat on the back and a high five and say, hey, I like what you're doing, or whatever. And so these are just ideas. That's not something you have to do. But in our context, if we've had a real intense call or we've had a real intense incident, and we've had to do a real intense report or we've had to focus, then what we need to do is we need to get up and step away. And a lot of times that might be having the opportunity to go have a cup of coffee with a fellow officer or an officer from another department. It might be being able to go into the office and just sort of sit for a minute and take a break. It just depends, but we need these energy boosters, because eventually after something really intense or concentrating for a long time, especially in our line of work, we're going to have an adrenaline dump. And so we need to be able to get that energy back in order to continue on with our day. And that's just part of what we do. So we talked about time management. Now we're going to talk about things that happen that waste our time. And we all are really kind of, we do it. We find ourselves doing some of these things, and wasting time is one of the most devastating problems that happen in a workplace. Whether it's water cooler time or whatever you want to phrase it as, organizations that have employees that waste time instead of doing work is one of the things that is constantly being talked about. And so here are some of the things that are suggested that can be done to overcome wasting time. First one is going to be to minimize daydreaming. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know that I can minimize daydreaming because it's what happens. It's what we do. We find our minds wandering to things that, oh, I should have done this, or oh, I got to remember to do that, or, and so it happens. But if we can minimize daydreaming, that can help. Daydreaming usually comes when the task that we are doing is either perceived to be too overwhelming, too boring, or we have preoccupations with personal problems, or that we're doing something that is sapping our ability to concentrate. And so if we recognize that what's happening is creating the opportunity to daydream, then we try and minimize it. Also, we can overcome wasting time by preparing a log that looks at what we're doing and whether we are actually utilizing the time to the best of our abilities. So a daily planner is a good idea. Using a spreadsheet for the geeks that like using Excel. Making a time log. Which with a time log, it might actually show us that we have leaks in our time that lets us know whether we are being a good using the time that we have, or if there's something that shows that we're letting time get away from us. And so that is preparing a time log of some sort. Also, avoiding and overcoming wasting time is to keep track of important names, places, and things. That way we don't have to keep using time to look this up or look that up or grab a phone book or a Rolodex or something along those. And then making visual associations, which allows us to remember where we put things. So it's sort of like having a parking place for everything. So knowing where we put things so we don't have to waste time by trying to remember or look for things when we should know where everything is. Set a time limit for certain tasks and projects. So making sure that we don't spend too much time on a project, because in essence that will waste time. Because there are some projects that are only worth so much time, and if we exceed that, then we're wasting time. Make sure we schedule similar tasks together. This is known as clustering. So if we have some small tasks that are similar in nature, we can perform them in one block of time. And then trying to flit from one task to another is inefficient. So if we kind of work on this task and then go, well, that's enough on that, go to this task and then, no, that's enough on that. All you're doing is sort of like the fly on the wall that goes from place to place to place to place, and you're really not getting anything accomplished by working a little bit and working a little bit and working a little bit, is you're basically just wasting your time on all these little projects and getting nothing accomplished in the meantime. Try and bounce quickly from task to task. If you have a brief pause, then you can jump to another task. And if you have accomplished something, celebrate that after work. And that you can help by overcoming time waste. So I know that we covered a lot of stuff really quickly, but this was a pretty short chapter in which we talked about good work habits and time management and how we could decrease tendencies toward procrastination and develop attitudes and values on how to become more productive, and also skills and techniques to become more productive. And then we talked about time wasting and how we can overcome those techniques. So our case study this week is found on page 468, and it has to deal with some procrastination and all of the concepts that we have going. Make sure that you read it fully. Use the chapter to answer all the questions following the case study. Make sure you post to the discussion board and answer at least one of your fellow classmates. And next week we will finish out the semester talking about personal problems and more on stress. That is it for this week in Human Relations and Criminal Justice. Thank you.